Okay, so we're on the last page, page 4 of Erica Damon's Fantasy Flash, Karl Smithy. And before I start the line edit for page 4, I need to go back to page 3 and change this. I just realized that here the him and the he is actually Karl, whereas he here is actually a Smithy, so I need to change that. Just to be absolutely clear to the reader so they don't have to wonder who he is. Okay, so that needs to change. So we start with Smithy saying to Karl, "This could have been the end of you." Smithy's voice was low, and he set Karl's hoof back down, standing straight and holding out a bent nail. Okay, so we have some issues with grammar here. The tenses are not quite right. We could separate this from the rest, because again, we're having a lot in one sentence, trying to get the character to do all sorts of things. Like, you're telling us his voice is low, and then he's doing this, and then he's doing this, and then he's doing that. So that's, no more than 3 things in one sentence. And I think we could get away with doing this as like, instead of saying this, and this needs to change to this. Smithy's voice was low as he set Karl's hoof back down, straightened, and held out a bent nail. And you could even simplify it further by doing this. Set down Karl's hoof, so we don't need this here. Let's see. Or you could even, just separate the two. Smithy's voice was low. He set down Karl's hoof, straightened, and held out a bent nail. So that would work too. But because this is so short, I think we can do this. We can just have Smithy's voice was low as he set down Karl's hoof, straightened, and held out a bent nail. So this is the Oxford comma. You don't absolutely need it, but it's just a convention. You've been lucky before, but this one came off in a bad way. So he's talking about the shoe, the lost shoe. Any more to the side, and it could have stuck somewhere sensitive. Karl's heart sped up. This had always been a game. Show his shoe to get time with Smithy, but he'd not thought about consequences, his heart leading him far more strongly than his head. So, again, there's a lot of issues with the grammar, the tenses, and his reaction to what Smithy said is good, but I was almost expecting a little bit of an internal monologue here. Maybe something like, "Oh dear," or "oops," something very small, so that could work here. This is fine. So here, there's problems with the grammar. What we can do is move things around. Okay. So I'm just going to put it I don't think we need this here. It's really obvious. And then we change this. And that makes it perfectly grammatical. Karl's heart sped up. Showing his shoe to get time with Smithy had always been a game. He had not thought about consequences, his heart leading him far more strongly than his head. Okay, so this is Smithy. If you want to see me so badly, you could just ask me to dinner. So Smithy knows exactly what's going on. Now, this little bit, do we need it? In real life, people do speak like that, but when you're writing in dialogue, you don't really want to have, these little bits there that can trip a reader up. So let me just see how attached Erica is to that, because it would be so much smoother just to say, if you wanted to see me so badly, if you want to see me so badly, you could just ask me to dinner. But I see how this could work. It kind of shows a bit of hesitation on Smithy's part. Yeah. Yeah, you could argue for this. That twinkle came back to Smithy's eye, and Karl wasn't sure how he had ever been unable to place the look before. Okay, that is a bit clunky. We need to change that. Was he serious? Was it a joke? A jest to lighten the suddenly somber moment. Okay, that twinkle came back to Smithy's eye. See, this is actually a filter. Erica doesn't always believe me when I tell her something is a filter. And I'm going to tell her anyway. And the way I know is this. Okay, so instead of this, I went with this. Make it into a question. He wasn't sure, so he's actually questioning himself, right? So you could even turn that into internal monologue. You could make that into italics and change this into I. How could I have not have placed that look before? But I think this works. How could he not have placed that look before? How could he not have identified or recognized that look? How could he not have placed that look before? So removing filtering actually deepens the point of view and actually closes the gap between the reader and your protagonist. So it's always good to deepen point of view, and removing filters is one way of doing that. So let's see. If you wanted to see me so badly, you could just ask me to dinner. If you want to see me so badly, you could just ask me to dinner. Yeah, I think she would probably want to keep this, and I'm okay with that. That twinkle came back to Smithy's eye. How could I not have placed that look before? Yes, this is definitely something that you could change into internal monologue. He wasn't sure. He's questioning himself. Was he serious? Was it a joke? A gesture lighten the suddenly somber moment? This would be a question 2. And I almost feel like I want to make that into internal monologue. So it would be I. That kind of deepens the point of view and brings the protagonist closer to the reader. This is like he feels anguish about this, right? Angsty, yeah, you want that. Smithy tucked the nail into a small pocket on his chaps, fingers lingering on the well-worn leather. Karl couldn't take his eyes off them. So Karl couldn't take his eyes off Smithy's fingers. My eyes are up here, Karl. Okay, this is a brilliant line. Smithy's voice cast low and Carl's eyes snapped up. Came? Sounded? Not cast. Smithy's voice snapped up. And you could even say, start a new line and say, Carl's eyes snapped up at the tone in Smithy's voice. Because everything else is about Carl, okay, not Smithy. So how about we do that instead? And instead of this, and instead of telling us what's not there, how about tell us what's there, this expression. You always want to give your reader cues using body language, tone of voice, expression on their faces. So that would be a good place to do that. Something new, something equally hard to define. Or maybe he was simply afraid to. Something new, something equally hard to define. Yeah, this is a bit clunky too. And depending on what Erica changes this to, telling us a bit about his expression, we can change this into something much less clunky. So, Cal tried to put words to his lips, but they weren't. Too long he'd played them in his head, but now it seemed. Okay, so again, this is a bit clunky. Cal tried to find the words, or get the words out of his mouth, right? Not put words to his lips, to find the words, or get the words out of his mouth. Something like that. Not put words to his lips. But they weren't coming. You don't need this. Too long he'd played them in his head, echoing his brain. Okay, so one or the other, not both. Far too long they had been echoing in his brain. I think I preferred this to this. So maybe we don't need this at all. For too long or far too long, they had been, because we're talking about the words, right? They had been echoing in his brain. But now that it was time, don't need that at all. That's all implied. So Cal tried to find the words, to get the words out of his mouth, but they weren't coming. Far too long they had been echoing in his brain, but now that it was time, they refused to come. So that would be stronger and more poignant. They refused to come. So that's important. Smithy leaned forward, looking out the door to the rest of the clients waiting. There's a lot, the in this phrase. How about just getting rid of this one and move the waiting up here? So it's a little better. Smithy leaned forward, looking out the door to the rest of his waiting clients. And Carl was enveloped in the scent of horses and heat. I think I'll be here till dusk. Okay. So Smithy is giving Carl a hint, and I think I prefer something like this. Likely, I'll be here till dusk. Now, this is, I would say this is a filter too, and I think Erica will not like me saying that, but I think it is. Because what I could do instead is, and that is a bit more immediate, a bit more intense. I don't think we need this. So this is another way to deepen POV, the point of view of your protagonist. Smithy leaned forward, looking out the door to the rest of his waiting clients. The scent of... Yeah, so we don't need this. The scent of horses and heat suffusing the air. So this brings the reader closer to your protagonist, and you always want to do that. So this is one way to deepen the POV. Likely I'll be here till dusk. So Smithy knows what Cal wants from him, and he's okay with it. He's more than okay with it. He wanted Cal to say the words. Again, we could change this. Did he want Cal to say the words? Or we could change that into an internal monologue. So we'll put that in italics and say, does he want me to say the words? I mean, that's another way of deepening POV using internal mono. But you would have to change the tense. Does he want me to say the words? Or if you really want to wrap this up, you can say, do you want me to say the words? So he's talking to Smithy in his head, so that's really immediate. You see how different it feels to do that? So some people are afraid of using internal monologue, and you shouldn't, especially in romance. You really want to use it. Don't use it, everywhere, all over the place. Just use it for the really intense bits, and that really helps. Do you want Carl to say the words? Does he want me to say the words? Do you want me to say the words? Do you see how different that sounds? So we don't really need this, do we? Let's see. Why else did he linger now? Why else had his hand lingered on Carl's coat? So I don't think we should use linger twice in the same para, like one sentence after the other. I think we can use something else here. I think it belongs here. Why else was he dawdling now? Because he has a whole queue of clients waiting for him outside, right? So why was he dawdling with Carl? So he had to. Why else was he dawdling now? Why else had his hand lingered on Carl's coat? Why no sharp words for him and only the mare? Now the thing about monologue is it works better when you don't use it for the whole paragraph, when you only use it maybe just for one question. Okay, so maybe we would just use this in italics as internal mono and leave the rest as is. Yeah, I think that would work better. If you don't want to use internal monologue, that's fine too. You can just keep it like this. Did he want Cal to say the words? Okay. So this is Cal, dinner then. And I hear him hesitating, so maybe we could use ellipsis here. So, or even he cleared his throat. Oops. Because he's a little bit unsure of himself, right? He's asking all these questions. So he's nervous. He's really nervous. So this is one way to show rather than tell the reader. So when you're done, yes. So that's nice. They were inelegant at the words. I don't think we need this at all. Not the profession he'd imagined in his head, but they were out there and that was something. Cal was sure Smithy could hear his heart pounding in his chest, see the way it beat against his rib cage. Okay, so this is really intense. We're coming to the climax of the story, right? He's professing his love. Well, not exactly, but he's professing his interest, okay? And I don't think profession is a good word choice here. But I know what she means. I know what Erica is trying to say. Not. I almost feel like it could be something like not a declaration. He's confessing something, right? Not the. But confession or profession in this instance would not work. Or you don't even need that at all. Just say not what he had imagined in his head. That should be good enough. But they were out there. And I don't think we even need this. That's implied. I have a feeling that Erica likes this. So I'm just going to offer that as a suggestion. But they're out there. Cal was sure Smitty could hear. Now this is definitely filtering. And we don't need that. We could just say, surely. Yeah. See, this is not necessary. It puts an extra layer between the reader and your story and your protagonist. Surely Smithy could hear his heart pounding in his chest. And this is implied, okay? So I don't think this is even needed. See the way it beat against his rib cage. It was beating. It beat. Yeah, it's kind of, the continuous tense is funny, it kind of brings more immediacy. The way it was beating against. It's very subjective, so I'm going to leave it up to Erica to decide. So, coming towards the end of the story, this sounds a little bit impersonal, so I'm just going to use Smithy here. Let the torture last long. His eyes twinkled and a grin spread on it, maybe across his face. That would be nice. Very nice indeed. Now, let's get you all fixed up. Cal nodded, words failing him once more, and Smithy was back at his craft. We can just say it was back at work at his craft, bent over the fire and forging him a new shoe. Cal leaned on the post and watched. Again, a little bit impersonal, so we just use him. I think it's very obvious to the reader. Dreaming of what it would be like to watch him not. Okay, that's a nice last line. It's not a complete sentence. It's a sentence fragment, but I like it. And I think maybe we don't even need this. And we can just make it smoother by using as here. Cal nodded, words failing him once more, as we don't need the comma here, as Smithy bent over the fire and forged him a new shoe. Yes, or you can say bent over the fire and worked on forging him a new shoe. Cal leaned on the post and watched him work, dreaming of what it would be like to watch him not work. Yes, I think that works. Okay, let's see. Surely Smithy could hear his heart pounding, could see the way it was beating against his rib cage. Or you could even just change this around and say, could Smithy hear his heart pounding? Or change it to, could you hear my heart pounding? See how much more intimate that would be? Can you hear my heart pounding? Can you see the way it's beating against my rib cage? So that's something to think about, how deep you want that POV, how close you want your reader to identify with your protagonist. It could totally work here, but it's entirely up to Erica. Smithy did not let the torture last long. His eyes twinkled and a grin spread across his face. That would be nice, very nice indeed. Now let's get you all fixed up. Cal nodded, words failing him once more. Failing him again, once more. Failing him again. Yeah, I like to shorten sentences because short sentences flow better than long sentences. Again, as Smithy bent over the fire and worked on forging him a new shoe. Or simply and forged him a new shoe. Well, I think I like this better because it takes time to forge the new shoe. Okay, Cal leaned on the gloves and watched him work. And you can just change the full stop to a comma. Dreaming of what it would be like to watch him not. Well, yeah, I kind of agree that this should be set off to put more emphasis on the last line. Okay, so that's nicely done. And that is Erica Damon's accepted submission to a season for romance, Cal and the Smithy, for the summer edition that's coming up next year, Summer Simmer. So if you would like to contribute, if you'd like to send us a sub, be sure to download a copy of How to Write Flash. That's really helpful. David wrote this, and it's really a good idea to read this first before you even attempt to write your own Flash. And if you have any questions, go to here and let us know. Okay, so that's it for now. Bye from me.
Hey everyone, I'm Erica and I wrote Karl and the Smithy. This was my first fantasy story. I don't write fantasy at all. I write horror and thriller and suspense and some contemporary romance under my pen name. But this one kind of came up by accident. I believe Rebecca posted this picture, which I'll try to add in here, of a centaur getting his feet done. And I kind of made a joke comment and gave him some dialogue, and everyone laughed about it. And then I kind of got washed away in writing the story. And I resisted doing it, but then I did it because I just needed to get Karl out of my head. And I wrote it quickly and kind of jokingly, but then I showed it to Rebecca and Cass and Diva, and they liked it a lot. So then I had to do something with it, and nicely it fits with our summer anthology coming out next year to follow up our Spring Blossoms anthology. So we started editing it. Diva did the developmental edit. We got that done pretty quickly, which was a relief. But then we got to the line edit, and my writing's never that clean. So this is not a shock to me. And Cass wanted to do the screen capture and narration. I said, go for it. The story's so far outside my wheelhouse, and I thought, maybe it can help some people who are new to things, because I've been writing for a while, but I'm certainly new to this style. It's not even really in my thriller style or my romance style. It's kind of somewhere in between. And Cass has been line editing me for a while now, so I'm kind of used to the back and forth, but she's never done the screen capture with the audio, and so it was interesting to hear all the little bits and pieces that don't make it into comments. Things that make her pause, things that make her say, I don't know about this. And so doing the edit with these videos running next to it was really an interesting experience. And I will say, especially in number 4, it's up today, a lot of times she will say, oh, I bet Erica loves this bit. She's not going to want to get rid of it. And she's right 99% of the time on those. She knows what my darlings are, and she knows when she wants to kill them. So there will be some back and forth on some of those, but I know in the end it's going to be better, and maybe I can save little bits and pieces of those darlings. But I think this kind of stories, this is what I like to use Flash for. Trying new things, whether it's an idea, a genre, a random piece of conversation that has kind of niggled its way into my brain that I need to do something with so I can get rid of it and move on with my life. Flash is a great way to do that because it can be 500 words. I think this one's just over 1,000. So it wasn't a big time commitment. It wasn't a big anything commitment. But I got to explore this new genre and even for myself a new style. So write Flash, write new things, try stuff out even if you think it's a joke. Somebody might love it, and then you end up with a story that maybe a little begrudgingly you really love too. So I hope you have enjoyed following along Karl and the Smithy's journey, and you can see the fully finished piece in our summer anthology next year.